Welcome to Healthy University, where we'll discuss issues and subjects on how you can live a healthier and more productive life. And now, here's your host for Healthy University, Alan Eisenberg.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Healthy University. And I got to tell you, this week has been so interesting for me. I got to talk to someone who I wrote about in my book, A Ladder in the Dark. I got to talk to my 7th grade teacher, who was really my first mentor, and who really, I think, in many ways saved me that year or helped me feel better at a very dark time in my life. So he wanted to read my book. We had connected through Facebook, and I had a chance to send him my book, and then afterward he was just, he just told me he was blown away. Again, I'm not trying to brag. It's just that I tried to write a very honest book about how the feelings of someone who goes through a youth trauma like bullying feels. And I think for him, he ended up being a principal and at the top echelon of the education game. And he really saw a lot of it. And he actually told me that his own children suffered from long-term effects of bullying as well, and it's really bothered him, and that I really helped with the book. So it was just a very magical time to talk to someone. 35 years later, after the last time I saw him, and have that experience with him. So if you haven't read the book, I'm not gonna ruin what the things he did are. You'll have to read it in the book. But in the meantime, I'm very excited about today's episode. I'm going to talk to Avdeep Bahra, who is actually someone we both talked on a different podcast once, and I was so impressed with her and the way that she explains things. Because Avdeep is an occupational therapist, and she enables clients to work through difficult emotions and overcome self-limiting beliefs. And so I think that's why I felt such a close kinship with what she has to say. She uses approaches based on mindfulness and energy psychology in order to help her clients achieve this and in turn enhance the quality of their life. Avdeep offers one-on-one appointments, mindfulness meditation classes, and mindfulness workshops, and is from the Greater Toronto area. If you're up north in Canada, as we say. She has co-facilitated at the University of Toronto on spirituality, health, and wellness. And Avdeep has an undergraduate degree in psychology and a master's in occupational therapy. And I think we're going to have a great conversation about mindfulness and how you really can help yourself along with the therapeutic help that Avdeep offers. So welcome to the show, Avdeep.
Thanks, Alan. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I just loved what we got to talk about last time on the other show, and I was really wanted to give you a chance to be able to talk more because I think you have a lot of great things to share. But why don't you start with kind of going over, a lot of people I don't think understand some of these terms that we talk about, like occupational therapist, and where you focus your specialty. So what is it that you do?
Well, first I have to tell you, a lot of people, like you said, don't know what occupational therapy is. Occupation, people think it's about going back to work, my occupation. But really it's about being able to do all the things that we do in life, whether it's get out of bed and go to work, get dressed, get bathed, do our banking, all those daily activities we do is what we enable clients to do, whether it's, if they're suffering a mental illness, anxiety, depression, if they've had a stroke or a hip surgery, or, if they have cognitive deficits after a head injury. Mm-hmm. So we'll either, help them through exercise or coping mechanisms or compensatory strategies. So that's, occupational therapy. But my passion really within occupational therapy is around sort of spiritual and emotional healing, because in a lot of our, occupational therapy models, I wish I had a diagram for you, but, we talk about a person, like a whole person. We mm-hmm. have the physical being, the cognitive, the affect, or, the emotional, mm-hmm. but the core of our being is our spirit, right? Or our spirituality.
Right.
And we, many of us are walking around really, I don't know how else to describe it, but to say with a broken spirit.
Mm.
And mhm,
Yeah, I was just going to say, go ahead, finish your thought, because I wanted to say something about that. That's so interesting.
well, spirit, I mean, in the Canadian Association of Occupational Therapy, they actually define it, spirit or spirituality, spirit, as the energy or life force that permeates all living things,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I mean, and this is where I see a lot of us have illnesses, whether it's mental illness or physical illnesses, because of, you hear in traditional Chinese medicine of qi, it's like our energy is blocked and we have areas that are not flowing well. So this is sort of where my passion seems to be going towards, using mindfulness in a lot of the approaches I use.
Well, what I find so interesting when we talk about spirituality, and certainly in the Western culture, I think there's a misnomer. I think you just define something, and maybe other people heard it, or maybe, it's worth repeating that spirituality is the spirit. And again, this idea of that we're beings of energy, and this isn't something you're saying or I'm saying, and that's not far-fetched. I mean, you can see it on any scans. We're beings of energy, and we know that energy doesn't dissipate. We know two things: energy doesn't dissipate, and energy can take many forms, right? And so when we talk about the spirit, I think that's what it's always been about. And over time, I think it's gotten washed into religion, so your spirituality is part of your religious identity and not the mindfulness that we'll talk about, I know, which is really looking at the individual. And I think as you were talking, I felt, the holistic individual. And, it's interesting. Like, I have a doctor, when I switched doctors a few years ago, I was looking for a doctor, and I came across this word DO. He wasn't an MD, he was a DO. And I was like, what is a DO? And he's a doctor of osteopathy. And what that means is that he takes a more holistic approach to how he does work with you versus, just giving you meds. Like, he does massage, he does chiropractic, he does, many other things. And I've really enjoyed going to him because I don't feel like he's just trying to figure out the medical or the medicinal world, but also, again, this deeper world of therapy, of making you better holistically.
Yeah, exactly. And at the core level, right? And getting to the root cause of what problems people have, right?
Oh yeah. And there's times where, you go there and he'll just put, like, I had a shoulder thing, and, he puts these little shock things, like your muscles are not acting right anymore, and then he'll fix that. Versus take this muscle relaxant, which, what those do. Those would put you out for
right.
for a while. So he's more apt to try to say, okay, your muscle is like a Pavlovian problem. Once it goes out of whack, you have to retrain it. So it'll keep doing what it's doing. Let's say, it's like a Pavlovian problem. And so I thought that was so interesting. And again, that focus on the me, which again, we talk about Chinese culture or Buddhism or Hinduism or all of these things. But I think I've been reading more and more articles about getting children to do mindfulness in Western culture, meditation and relaxation and how important these things are in our world. So have you noticed, like, an increase in your world of that?
Definitely. I mean, just that you mentioned children. I mean, they're doing it in schools here now, right? And a lot of sports team, I know, North America wide, not just Canada, are using mindfulness. It's really everywhere. I don't know if it's being well understood everywhere, but it is. Yeah, it's becoming a bit of a trend, but it's also spreading everywhere. So it's nice to see. I mean, just yesterday, actually, I had the opportunity it was a brief mindfulness breath awareness practice with 850 people for their wellness day, an organization. It was just amazing to see, that whole sea of people all just focusing on their breath. And did you know that breath in Latin is spiritus, right?
No, I did. I don't.
Yeah.
That was the one class I missed. I didn't get
Yeah.
my Latin in.
I was sleeping too. I just happened to be told that in my yoga class just recently.
Well, it's like I guess I was my yoga teacher was talking, or actually I heard it from somewhere else, but the word Om and how it's actually three syllables and everything means it has its own presence and cadence, and there's a reason you do it. You know, it actually has an effect on the brain.
Right.
So just when you say Om and you do that as part of your processing, and believe it or not, breathing I think was the first mindfulness thing I learned. One of the things I always talk to people about, I say, okay, this learning to belly breathe and how we don't belly breathe, and I guess singers do, right? Singers go back, and when they train, that's what they actually learn to do is breathe from their belly so they can get enough oxygen.
Right.
But at some point when we're teenagers, our breath moves up to our chest, which of course we have this great big bone. So I always like to prompt people by saying, okay, those of you that have had kids, we all wake up at 3 a.m. when we have a kid, when we have a new baby, and we go, oh my God, it's the baby breathing. And we go and check. I said, where are you checking? And every time, the person will say that I'm looking at their chest. I said, no, you're not. I said, you're looking at their belly.
Yeah.
Because babies breathe from their belly. And children actually do until I guess they say somewhere in our teen years, which is interesting because that's, of course, when we start to see more psychological issues. So I think the first thing I learned to do was actually belly breathe. And just that alone, when I was in a state of anxiety, was very powerful, very powerful.
It is powerful. I mean, you're probably aware, deep breathing, it stimulates the main nerve, the vagus nerve, right?
Right.
And the sympathetic nervous system. And that in itself allows the body to relax. It allows you to slow down your heart rate, lower your blood pressure, just calm your body and mind, right? And it's such an easy tool, but I think so many people are so busy in their lives, they forget to even take a moment to breathe.
Yeah.
And you think of the breath and how important it is for all our physiological functions, right?
Right. And I think the other part that you were talking about, I mean, I don't know how long your session went, but the technique I learned was like a 1 minute process. Do this belly breathing for 1 minute, and then that's it. It's not like, I think where a lot of people get mistaken, and even in meditation, I don't have time for that. I don't have to. So we're talking about minutes. We're not talking about expanded time.
Exactly. And even as an occupational therapist, I mean, we're talking about mindfulness as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to be a practice. People, I mean, maybe I'm jumping ahead, Alan.
Oh no, go ahead.
But I mean, people think of mindfulness and they think, okay, I have to be sitting in a quiet place and I have to sit cross-legged. My hands have to be in a certain position, and that's not what mindfulness is. It's maybe a form of meditation, but mindfulness, it can be in anything and everything you do during your daytime, right? And as an occupational therapist, that's what I love, because you could be drinking your cup of tea and be mindful, meaning be fully present in drinking your cup of tea. So feel the temperature, the taste, the cup on your lips, the cup in your hands. That's mindfulness too, right?
Right.
And you're already doing it. It's not like you're taking time out of your day, or
right.
I mean, to say it's part. You can be part of your every activity in the day, but it is a practice, right? It's about rewiring the brain, because we've become so accustomed to being outside of our body, thinking about what happened yesterday, what did so and so say to me, and for kids and teenagers, oh, that kid that said that to me, or what's going to happen next year. So we're always elsewhere. We're not here now, and when we are here now, there's actually so many simple things that can bring us joy, because we take so much for granted.
Well, and another interesting thing that I was told once, and it's always true, is that happiness, just as sadness, is fleeting. Some people complain. I was one of them. I never feel happy, and someone, a therapist once said to me, never. So do you expect to feel happy all the time? And I said, well, I expect to feel happier. He goes, But happiness is fleeting. When it comes, it comes. When it doesn't, it doesn't. And you have to have both sides, the yin and yang of what I talk about. But also that I think there's a lot of mistaken belief that this is the way it's done, and like you said, these people put their hands together. And I talked to this one woman, and she's like, I'm so busy I have 5 minutes, but I have a 5-minute meditation. She's like, I'm ADHD, but I can do this 5-minute meditation. And I said, well, that's exactly good. That's exactly all you need. If that gets you through the day. And then your idea of being in the present moment, really what I feel like I understood from that when I learned it, is that it sets your brain focusing from the outside looking in, like, oh, okay, right now, I'm drinking this tea and it tastes like this. And then even if you're in an anxious moment, you can say, oh, that's kind of interesting. My body's reacting this way. And so that's kind of being present without being affected is what I like to say.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Without being affected is a nice way to, also it's about being non-judgmental, right?
Right, exactly.
And that's, I think that's the other thing that a lot of people miss in mindfulness. And to be honest, I missed it in the beginning too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the more I practice mindfulness, the more I teach it, the more I do workshops, the deeper my understanding becomes. Because when I first took mindfulness, there's a few core foundational concepts, one of them being non-judgment, the other one being patience, beginner's mind, trust, non-striving, acceptance, and letting go. There's obviously a lot more depth into what each one means, but when you start to embrace the actual concepts in your mindfulness practice, that's what makes it mindful. Because It's just like you said, happiness is fleeting. So sometimes you may have sad moments or anxious moments. But when we can look at those so-called quote unquote negative experiences, with no judgment, they don't bother us as much either. And we can move through them easier.
And it really is a learning process. And I think, again, for not to be judgmental about the Western world, but we're so very stressed and competitive and feeling like, I think a lot of us are perfectionists, a lot of us at least who deal with our problems with our lives, are always striving like, I can't be perfect, I can't do this perfect. And as I started to go to yoga, and I'm about almost probably 2 years into going to yoga once a week, I learned it's just a practice. And sometimes I go and I'm in a great mood, and she wants to do this complicated move, and I can do it. And then there's times when I go and I can't. And there were frustrations at the beginning, but now I kind of realize, that's just the way your body is and your life is that sometimes everything's all the pistons are shooting at the same time. And sometimes you just have to step back and say, this is going to be what it is today.
Right.
And I think that's a big part that people struggle with, is that there is no perfection, right? It's really just about allowing that moment to be that moment. And then when it's done, it's done. And letting you move forward. And that is a practice.
It really is. It is. Yeah, it is. But it's awareness, like what you're talking about, right?
Right.
Noticing your thoughts and what you're thinking about your practice that day in yoga, whether it was how you thought it would be or wouldn't be, would or wouldn't be.
Yeah. And again, there's a lot of people out there that might say, well, yoga's not for me, and meditation I don't feel like is for me. Well, you can take a walk outside. One of the things that people miss every day is just how wonderfully beautiful the world is, the outside is, and breathing fresh air. There's certainly a difference between breathing the air in your house and breathing the air outside. And when you go outside and just start noticing things that you never noticed before. So you don't have to do something magical. You just have to take a walk sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's what's funny is, and what you want to do on your walk, as I say, is notice, like look around. And all of a sudden you'll see this beautiful bird, you'll see like a for me, a bluebird or a cardinal or something, and you can watch it for a little while, and and your mind will feel that. You will feel that joy in that moment. But believe it or not, we have to take a little break. So when we come back, I'd love to talk to you more about, I know that you might be able to tell me a little bit about what I went through and how you use your techniques to help others. So I'd love for you to share that. Okay?
Yep.
All right, great. So this is Alan Eisenberg, and I'm talking with Avdeep Bahra and Healthy University, and we will be right back.
You're listening to Healthy University with Alan Eisenberg.
Deep in a dark hole in the recesses of his mind, Alan tried to bury all the bad memories of the bullying that happened to him. But memories can't be buried, and he would be haunted by his youth and these memories for a very long time to come. Then he must confront and come to terms with his own youth and the things that happened to him. Find out what Alan didn't want to remember. Read A Ladder in the Dark, My Journey from Bullying to Self-Acceptance. Available now at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and most major book retail outlets. Welcome back. This is Alan Eisenberg with Healthy University, and I'm here with Avdeep Bahra, who's an occupational therapist focused on mindfulness and spirituality techniques to help people. And welcome back, Avdeep.
Thanks, Alan.
So we were talking a lot about mindfulness. From your angle, what are you seeing? Like, I'm sure you see a lot of people who struggle like I did with anxieties and depressions and stresses of life. And what do you do? How do you help someone like that? How do you approach it from your job?
Well, I mean, obviously we talked about the mindfulness piece, allowing people, so I do workshops and I do guided mindfulness group classes. So going through those concepts that we spoke about, and I use the breath a lot, so I have them focus on their breath to bring them to the present moment, just to get that relaxation response in their body, which in itself is a healing benefit for people that have anxiety or depression or physical issues. So that's one of the things I often use. I do other energy modalities. I do something called, it's a Meridian therapy, so it's similar to techniques like emotional freedom technique, tapping.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically anyone can present with a problem. It can be anything. So, for instance, I still feel angry at, say, my abuser from childhood. Mm-hmm. So, it's working on the person's emotion, because again, our emotions and our thoughts are really an energy. In the end, they're an energy. And using certain meridian points, like acupressure meridian points around the eye, at the chest point, I'll actually guide my clients to experience, it's quite guided, the process, but to experience whatever emotion they start with. Because like I said, it's very much in line with mindfulness, because often those kind of what we think is bad emotions, we'll resist them. We don't want to go there. Right. So you may have heard the phrase that what we resist will persist, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, often things like sadness or anger, and culturally, I think in our society, we're brought up as saying those are bad emotions. Don't feel them, don't express them, keep them inside, and then we're just conditioned to react that way. I can only be happy, don't show my sadness, don't show my anger. But with techniques like this Meridian therapy, it's actually called primordial energy activation and transcendence. I guide them to feel that emotion, and then it's interesting, as we go through the process, people will actually begin to feel the opposite. So how you mentioned earlier on, there's the yin yang, right? The dark and the light. We're whole beings, so we have to have both the dark and the light.
Right.
But as we go through this process, people will start to feel the opposite emotion. So say they start with sadness, they may start to feel the happiness. Mm-hmm. And then it's almost like it's an integration of these emotions, because when they start, that anger or the sadness it has a negative emotional charge, like an electrical charge, energetic charge. So we end up having the positive so that you can sort of integrate them and it becomes whole. And you, in the end goal for this approach is to feel at peace, which is what everyone wants anyway, right?
Right.
So it's really interesting. And often what also happens is that a lot of our triggers are subconscious. We don't even know things are triggering us or upsetting us or making us sad because they're subconscious. Like 95% of our thoughts are actually subconscious. We run on about 5% that's conscious.
Exactly.
Right? So, I mean, as I work with clients, sometimes, they may have visions come up and they'll say, oh, my mom just came up. And then I'll guide them and say, well, what does that image mean to you? How does it make you feel? And we go deeper and deeper. It actually can go to more root causes of why they're feeling angry or sad now. So it may actually go back down to like, oh, my mom used to say whatever to me, or it could be something really minor, or it could be something more major, but you're getting more to the root cause of what's affecting them now and their emotions now. So it's like, you may have also heard of the, peeling away the layers of the onion.
Right, of course, yeah.
Yeah, so it's when we clear that subconscious stuff, and sometimes it's subconscious beliefs that we have about ourselves that, I'm not worthy, or I'm not good enough, and those things cause issues with self-esteem and self-confidence. And we see that so much with teenagers now and even adults, right? So
you don't have to tell me.
Yeah.
That's the CPTSD, the complex PTSD we were talking about before the show.
Yeah.
It's real. It's there. And, it's interesting. You brought up tapping, and I think some people either haven't heard of that, or if they have, they think it's some crazy mystical thing. But I have a guy at work. We talk a lot because he deals with a lot of his own anxieties and depression. And he had found tapping. And for him, it was this magical, new, wonderful thing. And, he had taught me some of it. And for me, it just wasn't the thing. But that's the other part that I think people have to understand, is that they have to do what feels right for them. There's many different therapies, right? There's many different things they can do.
Exactly.
And if they don't like one, it's like acupuncture's kind of close to tapping, but it's another one that people can try, as well as massage, of course. And, I went to an acupuncturist. Maybe they weren't very good, but it certainly wasn't my thing. It's like, no, I don't want that. That's discovery. And just like some people don't want to be massaged or touched, that's not their thing. There's a lot of ways they can find to do what they want, to get what they want. But you're so right about the subconscious. I talk all the time about that, and how I actually do a trick with people. I don't remember if I told you this or not, but
I don't think so.
But it's my little bullying trick. So if I'm talking to people about bullying, which is my subject, or any abuse, I'm sure just as you were talking about a mother and how that comes up, what I say is go back to when were you bullied. So you do this with adults. I talk to adults mostly. A younger person, this would not work on, but. I say go back to, what was it, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, and of course that's when it was. So yeah. And I go, okay, so who is your best friend, first name and last name? Don't have to say it aloud, and I'll usually just make the whole room stand and sit if they can't remember these things, right? And everyone's standing, their best friend, first and last name, and I'll say, okay, could you name the bully first and last name? And sit if you can. And most everybody's still standing. And I said, stay standing if you can't remember your teacher's name. And they're still standing. Because the teacher didn't have the impact. Maybe they did, if they were a mentor. But your subconscious still holds that. And what I was trying to tell people was, think about first and last name. Think about all the people you've met in your life and how difficult that would be. How many first and last names do you remember? Without having a photographic memory, you have an emotional memory, and everybody has an emotional memory, and that's what's holding. For me, I'm what I call an empath. I'm a sensitive person, and so I actually remember goofy details. If someone plays a song from the 70s or 80s, I can name the artist, the album and the year within 1 year.
Wow.
Because I'm thinking about where I was when I heard it. Because that's how my memory works. It's like it's all about, oh, I was here and I heard that song.
Right.
Or I was experiencing this. And sometimes, of course, when I was in recovery, or really not in recovery, a song would play from the 70s I hadn't heard in a long time, and I would well up with tears. And it could be a rock song, it's like, but to me, it carried that emotion.
Yeah.
It brought it all back.
Yeah.
That's when I realized how powerful the subconscious
It is.
was.
And a lot of emotions, they say we hold them in our cells. Like our cells have memory, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think many who hold these emotions in their bodies end up manifesting with physical issues too, right? I mean,
right.
Even with post-traumatic stress syndrome, people end up having unusual, quote unquote, unusual symptoms that nobody seems to be able to diagnose, right?
Right. And they can't, they can't pinpoint it. That was the biggest problem with me and anybody is that they just can't pinpoint it, because a lot of it is blocking, right? We tend to block, and that's what I did. Is I thought, okay, this happened, and I'm just going to block it instead of accepting it. Instead of allowing it to just be part of my being, I wanted to block it. And as you said, if 95% of our mind is subconscious, it's still there.
It's still there.
So I always equate it to like Pink Floyd's The Wall, or for me, my ladder in the dark concept of the hole that I dug to try to bury things, and eventually it's the wall, or in my book, it's going to fail. It's going to break. It's not. You're not strong enough to build that type of wall.
No.
And when we do, all it does is haunt us. And we feel more alone than ever, right? So that's what always scares me is that. So what techniques, I think, what should people really be thinking about doing? And I don't mean that like in a general sense. It's like what can everybody do to be better?
In terms of health and wellness, I think there's so many things we can do. Even, you mentioned earlier on, like walking, being outside, right?
Mm-hmm.
Exercise, sunlight, diet is huge these days. I mean, our diet and what we eat, the processed food, even that affects things like our hormones and our adrenal function, and all those can trigger things like anxiety, depression, and many mental illnesses. So diet is important.
Oh yeah.
Connecting with like-minded people. We're social beings. We need connections with people. We want to be connected with people.
I actually think that's where we're failing in the most, is that as technology's improved, we do less and less talking and sharing, and I think there's even people they don't even know how to do it anymore. And for me, being the extrovert and being also someone who wants to talk about my issues, talk therapy I found to be the best therapy for me. Because once I talked it out, enough times, then it was just a part of me. It wasn't me. It wasn't haunting me.
Right.
And that was very powerful. And I think the other power is learning to listen. So,
Exactly.
or be empathetic. What I say is be empathetic, which is totally different than sympathetic.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, I think, and that's part of what I do in my work too, right? I mean, people want to be heard, right? And they want, I think that's why talk therapy is also useful, because people want to be heard with no judgment.
Right. And I think that's a key, is judgment, or even too much advising.
Exactly.
It's like, I've always thought that the end result of any therapy is that you figured it out yourself and someone helped you get there. Gave you techniques, gave you help and support. But if you are still trying to block all the time, you're going to struggle. And that's the way I feel, is that once I stopped blocking these memories and stopped letting them haunt me, that's when I found freedom. That's when I found who I really was.
Yeah. It's like these shackles let go of you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's weird, it's like you think, well, this is who I'm going to end up being. And I think, again, at my low point, I'm like, well, this is what life's going to be for me from now on.
Right.
And of course, that doesn't feel like much of a life at that point. And that's the scary part, of course. And, you have to convince yourself, I think, somewhere along the way. The first step is to find someone maybe like you, or obviously there's many people who are out there. And again, not to be scared of the fact that what you and I are talking about, or what you do, is works with some people and doesn't with others. Just like psychiatrists, psychologists, life coaches, you have to find mentors. You have to find the right one for you.
Mm-hmm. And people know, right? I mean, I think that's the other thing people have swayed away from. They don't trust their gut anymore, right?
Yeah.
In the end, when we trust our gut, we find the right therapist or right healer or right whatever for us.
And I always say, there was a certain amount of fate in my story, which was, the first one I went to, just took my $250 and then gave me 15 minutes and a bunch of pills. And I was like, this isn't going to work. And so I called some people that I knew from my activity, because I was already doing, bullying issue stuff. So I'd already met many good people to kind of advise me. And they sent me to this one person who ended up taking over the office that my company had moved out of, and was sitting almost exactly where I sat in the same building that I had just vacated a year earlier. And I thought, there's something, again, not going too far, but fate plays a part. There's something that tells you that this is the right thing. And maybe it was that comfort, maybe it wasn't necessarily the psychologist or the therapist, but the comfort of knowing that where I was, that also helped.
The environment, it makes
Yeah.
a difference too.
And I think that's the other thing that people are scared about is a lot of people, and I've known a lot of people over my career who they got law degrees, they got this degree because they wanted to make money, and they found out how miserable they felt. And several of them changed. But I think a lot of people don't. They feel stuck.
They do.
And that's a very unhealthy place to be as well. So I hope that as we look at the future, that people do the things that bring them pleasure. Because when we do things like what we're doing here, this is what brings me pleasure. I can't tell my work people that, the people I work with in my day job, but this is what I love. I studied media, and I love doing media and talking,
right,
and helping. I'm a helper. I want to help.
Yeah.
So
and that's what people need to do, find more things that they love to do. How many people can do that? When I went to one of my therapists, he said, tell me 10 things that you love to do. This was 3 years ago. I couldn't even come up with 2.
Yeah.
And now I could list them off in 15 seconds,
And that's the sad part, is that that's the first thing to go is like, you just say, I really can't do anything anymore. I really don't want to. If you're at a low point, your mind's gonna tell you don't want to do anything.
Yeah.
And it's actually a battle between your will and your mind to begin with, I always say. So like for me, exercise, like I'd never exercised, and ended up in a desk job, and really found out that my mind didn't want me to exercise, but my will forced me to. And when I did, my mind was happier, of course, because endorphins, dopamine,
mind-body connection.
Yeah.
No, I was just thinking about, like cognitive behavioral therapy too. It's the same thing, right?
Right.
Your thoughts affect your emotions affect your body, then your body affects your thoughts. So it's a cycle. They're all connected, right?
Right. And again, it becomes like I say, it's a cycle, and it doesn't stop until you learn to put the brakes on it. But a lot of people get stuck. And I went to a session. I like to go to sessions every once in a while for people with anxiety, and this one person came, and she actually hadn't left her house in like 6-7 months. She was with her husband, of course, and the only thing that was the right thing to say at that moment in a group session was, congratulations for coming.
Yeah.
Because I've actually known a lot of people over time who said, we have these things at libraries, and they got to the library, but they couldn't get out of their car. So they actually tried so hard, and they still couldn't get there. And that always makes me so sad. It just does. It's just, again, my empath self goes, if they walked in, then they would have had that same gym-like experience, because I'm sure just her being there, like, let her endorphins go a little bit. She was happy to hear there were a bunch of people in the room who understood what she was saying and just accepted it.
Right.
And didn't judge. Like you said, going back, I think judgment is the first thing you got to throw out. Mm-hmm. And just stop judging and just start listening, and maybe finding a way to be sympathetic. And if you've gone through it, then you can be empathetic. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think Bree Bren, I don't know if you've ever watched her TED Talks. She has a great one on the difference between sympathy and empathy. And it's pretty funny. She's kind of a comedic person who talks about serious subjects.
I'll have to check it out.
It's very good. I'll put a link to it on this so people can see it, because I think it's worth everybody seeing. It's just wonderful. So I have a final question I like to ask. I know it's hard to believe we've run out of time, but that's what good conversation's all about, right? That's what talk therapy is all about.
Yeah.
So what advice do you use for yourself? I think, that's important that people understand. We're all beings on this earth, and we're all working toward the same thing. So being that we're Healthy University, what advice do you use yourself to live a more happier and healthier life?
That's a loaded question, because I feel like I've done so much, Alan, that I don't even know where to begin. But I'll try.
Just one tip.
I think for me right now, honestly, non-judgment has been a huge, huge thing to help me shift. And I think even for clients, to shift how they think and they feel. Because if you can look at your thoughts and look at them with less judgment, you tend to feel happier. Mm-hmm. So that's been a big one for me. Non-judgment and just accepting what is, not judging it as bad, not judging it as good. Mm-hmm. So that's one key thing. And one other thing for me has been about learning to be kind to myself. Mm-hmm. Learning to love myself and not worry so much about what other people think. And I think everyone has to go back to being kinder to themselves and making time for themselves, whether it's that 5 minutes or it's 2 minutes to take a breath or half an hour to enjoy your children or your pet. People just need to spend time taking care of themselves more. We're just so busy. We're so stressed out, and stress causes disease, right? There's so much more illness these days. So
that's why companies like mine enact, they'll pay me back for going to the gym. They know what they're doing. They've done their studies. They know that the money that they're paying me saves them a lot of money in my absence and sickness and all that. And so they pay me to go to the gym.
That's great. Wow.
Yeah.
Wish more companies did that.
Yeah, it's nice, and it's starting to be more trending here. I think, as people realize, hey, if I do if I offer benefits for people to be healthier, like they do Weight Watchers at my company, and all of these very smart, like little things that I know, just because having spent so much time, what they're doing is saying, hey, if you do these things, chances are you won't use our sick benefits as much. You won't go to the doctor as much. You won't, and that's a lot more expensive than the gym.
Exactly, they're being proactive, right? It's almost like proactive healthcare, right?
Yeah, but it still amazes me how many people don't take advantage of the things that are offered to them. So again, I think part of what even you're saying is do find things to do for yourself. One of my favorite sayings is there's only one person that you're going to have to please and take care of 24/7, 365 your whole life.
Yeah.
That's
exactly.
you. And if you don't do that, then how can you do it for someone else?
I totally agree. Yeah. And people think often that it's selfish to take care of themselves, and it's not at all.
Right. Well, yeah, that's another thing that I always say is a mistaken thought is the word egotism. Like people think they're egotistical if you're constantly going, I don't want to do that. You're allowed to say I don't want to do that. If you don't want to do it, don't do it.
Yeah.
Unless it's something you have to do. But I always say, and I'm sure you've studied Freud as well, there's three parts. There's the id, the ego, and the superego. And the middle, the balance, is the ego. So to have an ego is to feel good about yourself. To have a superego means that you're that's what we think of as egotistical. And to have an id would be like you don't think a whole lot of yourself. So really, I think we've developed a feeling like we do about everything. Average in school for us is C's, but nobody wants to get a C. That won't get you into college, but that's what average is.
Yeah.
And we're not allowed to be average. We're not allowed to be that we have to be spectacular.
Yeah, perfectionism again, right?
Right. And again, that's only going to lead to disappointment because we're not robots.
No, we're not. We're human beings.
Well, thank you for your time. So how can people reach out to you? How can they get in touch with you? Do you have a website or?
Yeah, I have a website. So it's just my name, avdeepbahra.com.
So that's AVDEEPBAHRA, right?
Yes, .com.
Okay. Great.
Best way to reach me.
Yeah, and I'm sure we could do this again sometime, and I'm sure we will, because there's so much depth in the conversation about these things, and as I'm sure as time passes and you see more people, and I say I learn more. There's more to the conversation.
There is for sure. Yeah.
And the first thing that again, mindfulness and all these things we're talking about, there's many ways to get there. It's not just this one thing, or it's not just meditation or yoga or tapping or all the things we talked about today. There's many, many more things you can do. And like I said, the easiest one is take a walk,
Yeah.
or breathe.
Just breath.
Breathe, right?
Yeah.
So thank you for being on, Avdeep. I truly appreciate it. I think it's very helpful for even me or for others to hear that these things exist. And again, it's not to say that, like I say, it's not to say that you shouldn't take medicine or do other things that you want to do. I don't believe medicine cures. I believe medicine masks to allow you to be cured. And I've watched a lot of people spend their whole lives on medicine and still be very unhappy. And so I think we have to bring happiness in. And I thank you for talking about that and sharing with me today.
Thank you, Alan. It was an honor to be on here.
Great. Thanks, Avdeep. This is Alan Eisenberg with another episode of Healthy University. I hope you join us next time, and have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Healthy University, brought to you by Bullying Recovery, LLC. This podcast does not replace the need for medical advice, professional diagnosis, opinion, treatment, or services to you or any other individual. The information provided here or through linkages to other sites is not a substitute for medical or professional care, and you should not use the information in place of a visit, call, consultation, or the advice of your physician or other healthcare provider. Join us next time for more Healthy University.